It's great to see you all, and it's great to be back because I actually visited SOCOM and the MacDill Air Base back in 2017. And I was briefed, and today I was briefed again, and a lot has changed. And that reflects that you are able to adapt to a changing world, and that you reflect that we are facing different threats and different challenges now than we did back in 2017. As mentioned, my visit here to SOCOM ends a quite extensive visit to the United States. We started in Washington on Saturday. We have met with the administration, but also spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill, meeting with both parties, with Republicans and Democrats. And then yesterday we went to Alabama, to Troy, and there we saw how they are making some of the most advanced and important weapons for this alliance. We saw actually the javelins, but of course they're also making a lot of other types of weapons there. And then my visit ends here at MacDill Air Base and SOCOM. And therefore, I would like to start by thanking you for your service, what you do every day, because special operations are vital to any military operation, and therefore so important for the whole NATO Alliance. And you are the best of the best. You are key to so many of the things we do as an alliance and also as individual allies. And the great thing here is that, of course, you have the U.S. Special Operations Forces and Command, but you also have NATO allies and partners working together with them. So actually what you do here is not only important for the U.S., but it's important for the whole alliance and the way we work together with partners in Europe, but also partners, global partners around the world. Special Operations Forces, as you know, are often the first in and the last out, and that puts you often in danger. So let me also pay tribute to all those who have paid the ultimate price, also recently, and therefore we need to remember them and express our condolences to all those who have lost loved ones. The reality is that we are now living in a more dangerous world than we actually did back in 2017, when I was here last time. Because since then we have seen increased great power rivalry, not least with China, the Taiwan Strait. We see a continued threat of terrorism, which is cyber threats. But then we have a new war in the Middle East, and we have a full-fledged war in Europe, in Ukraine, the war of aggression against Ukraine. All of this has led to that, that NATO has implemented the biggest adaptation, the biggest change to our alliance since the end of the Cold War, with more forces on higher readiness. For the first time in our history, we have combat-ready troops in the eastern part of the alliance. And allies are now actually investing more in defense. For many years, as you know, defense budgets went down, especially in Europe. And now, over the last years, all allies have started to increase defense investments. And more allies meet the guideline of spending at least 2% of the GDP on defense. This also means that allies are investing more in special operations. Allies and partners, in the national capabilities, but also in working together with partners as allies throughout NATO. And what happens here, all the activities that I was briefed on just before we came to this room, reflects the increased importance of special operations. NATO is responding because we need to do that together. The good news is that we see that NATO is responding in a way which actually continues to demonstrate that NATO is the most successful and the strongest alliance in history. And we are responding also by supporting Ukraine, because we have many challenges. And the long-term most important challenge for NATO is China and the heavy investments in new modern military capabilities and the attempts to coerce also neighbors and to threaten neighbors like Taiwan. But the most immediate challenge we face is, of course, the war in Ukraine. And I welcome that NATO allies and partners are providing Ukraine unprecedented support. You are part of that, and thank you for that. We are tested in Ukraine because if President Putin wins in Ukraine, it's not only a tragedy for the Ukrainians, it makes also the world more dangerous and us more vulnerable. So therefore, it is in our national security interest to support Ukraine. And I strongly believe that actually what we do in Ukraine is important, not least because what we have achieved there is that by using a fraction of our defense budgets, we have inflicted heavy losses on the Russian combat capabilities without putting our own forces in harm's way. And that demonstrates that we should continue to support Ukrainians. Of course, we all hoped for greater achievements in the offensive the Ukrainians launched last year. But we have to remember where this started. When the full-fledged invasion was launched by Russia back in February 2022, many feared that Russia was going to take control over Kiev within days and the rest of Ukraine within weeks. That did not happen. The Ukrainians have been able to push back the Russian invaders. They have liberated like 50% of the territory occupied by Russia in the beginning. And they have been able to open a corridor in the Black Sea, which is a great achievement to push back the Russian Black Sea fleet. And they have been able to inflict heavy losses on the Russian armed forces, more than 300,000 casualties, thousands of armored vehicles destroyed, and hundreds of aircraft. So we have to take this into account because this demonstrates that the support we provide to Ukraine, United States, all the NATO allies, is actually making a difference on the battlefield on the ground every day. I say this because my main message has been throughout this visit that we should not step down, we should actually step up and ensure that Ukraine gets the support they need. We have the capacity, we have the capabilities. What we need is the political will to ensure that we deliver the support they need to actually protect our values and to make the world safer compared to a situation where we allow President Putin to win. This is not least important because what goes on in Ukraine is closely watched by authoritarian leaders all over the world, in Iran, in North Korea, but not least in Beijing. Beijing is watching Ukraine, and we know that what happens in Ukraine and Europe today can happen in Asia and Taiwan tomorrow. So this is interlinked, and that's the reason why this really matters for NATO. Then let me just end this very brief introduction by saying that I will come back to the United States, not necessarily to MacDill Air Force Base, but I will come back to the United States at least in July, when we are going to have the NATO summit with all the heads of state and government coming here to celebrate NATO's 75th anniversary. That will be a summit where we celebrate the alliance, but also where we're going to make important decisions on deterrence defense, on working with our Asia-Pacific partners, and also on Ukraine. But most of all, we will demonstrate the unity of 31 allies, and soon 32. Because you mentioned Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Finland. That's absolutely correct. But then very soon we will have Sweden as the 32nd ally. So we will demonstrate, we will celebrate the unity. NATO is the most successful alliance in history because we have been able to change. The world is changing, but also because we have been able to stand united despite the differences. We are 31, soon 32 allies from both sides of the Atlantic, with different history, different culture, different political parties in power, but we have always been able to unite around our core task to protect and defend each other. And the purpose of NATO is to prevent war through credible deterrence, is to preserve peace by standing together. So as long as we continue to communicate to any potential adversary in a credible way that an attack on one ally will trigger a response from the whole alliance, we are safer and stronger than when we try to do this alone. So, NATO is a good deal for all allies. NATO is important for Europe, but NATO is also important for the United States, especially since the United States is now more concerned about China, the size of their economy, the heavy investments in new military capabilities, technology. The United States represents 25. The United States is by far the biggest ally. At the same time, we have to know that the United States represents 25%, a quarter of the world economy, the world's GDP. Together with 31 NATO allies, we represent together 50% of the world's GDP and 50% of the world's military might. So NATO is a good deal for the United States. NATO makes also the United States stronger and more secure. So in NATO we stand together because it benefits us all, and that's what we're going to celebrate when we have the NATO summit in July. So thank you so much, and then I'm ready to take some questions. Maybe you need this because they will want to have it on the...
Yes, sir. I'm Commander Fredrik Borchgrevink, the Norwegian Exchange Officer to US SOCOM J3 International. I have one question. With Sweden's impending membership, what does the future of the NATO Alliance look like for other countries that would join?
Norwegians are everywhere, you know. You cannot get rid of them. No. Well, when we have the Swedes in, NATO will be stronger. And for Norwegian, and even Norwegians understand that. So the good thing is that it's by having Sweden in, we will have a very advanced, well-trained, well-equipped defense force, the Swedish defense force, as a full NATO ally. That will be important for Sweden. It will be important for the Nordic region. It will be also in particular important for the Baltic region, because if you look at the map, you see the Baltic Sea and you see Sweden, and of course our ability to reinforce the Baltic states will be significantly enhanced with a Sweden member. And of course that comes on top of Finland, which then also further strengthens NATO's presence in the Baltic and Nordic region. But most of all, it will just make NATO stronger in all ways, and it also demonstrate that President Putin made a huge strategic mistake when he invaded Ukraine, because we have to remember that just weeks and months before that invasion, it was in December 21, he sent a letter, a draft treaty he wanted NATO to sign. It was some kind of ultimatum where he said that he demanded that NATO should reject or say clearly no more NATO membership, to close NATO's open door for new members. That included Ukraine, but also Finland and Sweden. That NATO should remove its forces from the eastern part of the alliance, also from Poland and from the Baltic countries, Romania. And of course, we said that's not possible. He invaded Ukraine because he wanted less NATO. Putin is getting the exact opposite. He's getting more NATO troops in the eastern part of the alliance. We have reinforced our presence there. He Finland is already a member. Sweden will soon be a member. And Ukraine is closer to NATO membership than ever before. So it demonstrates the big strategic defeat that Putin has suffered by invading Ukraine, and Sweden is part of that picture. And I'm looking forward to have Sweden as a full member.
Sir, thank you for coming. My name is Cameron Gallagher, Army Aviation Officer. I'd like to ask a question about the Indo-Pacific, as you talked about. NATO's are arguably as strong as it's ever been in a 75-year alliance. What lessons do you think, through NATO's past or present, would you share with some of the partners in the Indo-Pacific if they were looking to expand between mini-lat and multilateral alliances? Obviously, there's a few from ASEAN and AUKUS, but if you were looking back at NATO's history, what would you share to expand some of those networks across the Indo-Pacific with some of our friends and partners? Thank you.
NATO is a regional alliance. NATO is an alliance of North America and Europe, and we will remain a regional alliance. So NATO is not going to be a global alliance with Article 5 applied for countries in, for instance, the Asia Pacific. But NATO, as an alliance of North America and Europe, we face global threats. And the reality is that's nothing new. Terrorism is global. That brought NATO to Afghanistan. Cyber is global. Space, which becomes more and more important in our defenses, is truly global. So therefore, the message from NATO leaders and also from NATO is that as we remain an alliance of North America and Europe, we should work more closely with our Asia-Pacific partners. And we have 4 partners which are formally in a formalized partnership with NATO in the Asia-Pacific. And that's New Zealand, Australia, Japan, and South Korea. We are working on how we can make our forces even more interoperable, how we can address issues like cyber and other challenges we face together. And of course, how we also can address the common challenge we face. And that is China's growing assertive behavior. China tries to control the South China Sea. That matters for our Indo-Pacific partners, but it matters for global economy. It matters for all of us. We see how China is using cyberspace against all of us. And also in Europe, we see how China is actually coming closer to us by trying to control our critical infrastructure, harbors, ports, airports, and for instance, we had a big discussion about 5G and telecommunications networks. So on resilience of our economies, on interoperability between our forces, the Asia-Pacific partners and NATO, on freedom of navigation, all of these issues are issues where we are now working more closely with our Asia-Pacific partners. I think it's important for us, it's important for them. And they have told us very clearly that they are, as our Asia-Pacific partners, are watching what happens in Ukraine very closely, because they know that security is not regional, security is global, and actually they have stated that what happens in Ukraine can happen in Asia tomorrow. Then lastly, I think it's important to also realize that what we have seen, not least in the wake of the war in Ukraine, is that Russia and China are more and more aligned. So again, this idea that we can divide security into geographic spaces doesn't make sense. China has not condemned Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. China is spreading Russia's narrative about the war, blaming NATO allies for the war. China is propping up the Russian economy, and just days or a couple of weeks before the invasion in February 2022, the invasion of Ukraine, President Xi and President Putin signed a treaty where they promised each other a limitless partnership. So Asia-Pacific matters for NATO. We work with the partners, and Europe and NATO matters for Asia-Pacific, and that's one of the big changes that have taken place in NATO over the last years is that we are actually expanding our cooperation with Asia-Pacific partners.
We're going to do one more picture because he has a flight. We want to take one more question. We'll go with our partner.
Sir, good morning. First of all, thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure and an honor. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Gabriel Zidok from Italy, Italian Special Forces Liaison Officer to J3 International. My question, sir, divided into two more parts. First, you mentioned space and cyber. How do you see NATO facing this new emerging threat in the multi-domain? And what are the biggest challenges, in your opinion? Talking about challenge, how do you see NATO facing combating private military companies? Thank you.
No, space and cyber is extremely important, and it is in a way reflected by the way NATO has adapted and changed. Over the last years, we have done a lot, both when it comes to space and cyber, meaning, for instance, that we have clearly stated that, or we have recognized that a cyber attack can be as damaging as a kinetic attack. So we have made it absolutely clear that a cyber attack can trigger Article 5, meaning that if it's serious enough and the consequence of a cyber attack is deemed crossing the threshold for Article 5, we can invoke Article 5, meaning we can invoke the collective defense clause of NATO, saying that an attack on one is regarded as an attack on all. Some years ago, that was not obvious. So it sends a clear message that cyber matters. The same about space. We have also established a cyber command. We are established also a space center, and allies are stepping up what they do to coordinate their efforts in space, because what happens in space, of course, as you know, has direct consequence of what we can do on the Earth. Communications, surveillance, all of the stuff, or a lot of the stuff we do, also special command, special forces operations are dependent on satellites and information which is transmitted to our space capabilities. So, and many of them are also, and we see that also our potential adversaries are building up capabilities to actually attack our communication systems in space. So space and cyber will be integrated in any future military conflict. There's no way to separate that. It's also part of what's going on in Ukraine today or in the South China Sea. So that's a huge challenge. For me, it just demonstrates the importance of NATO. Because it demonstrates the importance of all allies contributing in different ways. It also demonstrates that, of course, big allies do more than smaller allies. But Luxembourg, one of the smallest NATO allies, they actually have quite advanced space capabilities, which they share with all allies. So meaning also that even small allies can contribute to the great task of the whole alliance. So it demonstrates a need for interoperability, it demonstrates a need for allies working together, and you know, as special forces, that also space and cyber is key to what you do. So yeah, that's what I have to say. Then once again, thank you so much. It has been a great honor to be here, and thank you for your service. I'm extremely grateful, and on behalf of the whole of NATO, thank you so much, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.